Buddha's idea is that, we have this consciousness, the part of us that makes us the person that we are, as opposed to the eyelashes and the nose and the feet, right? There's the body part of us, and we've got the consciousness or mind. These, Buddhism uses these words to mean the same thing. Consciousness, mind. So the mind part of us, the conscious part of us, is the person, if you like. Of course, the body obviously plays a big role. We do the shooting with the body. We do the hugging with the body. The body clearly is incredibly important. But if you think about it, although we tend to really identify ourselves as our body so strongly, because it's what we see and touch and feel every day, isn't it? But we know perfectly well, the eyelashes don't make decisions and our fat belly doesn't get depressed, It's not that. It's not your, even your physical human heart or your hand that feels love. This is very clear if we analyse. It's the conscious part of us. In Buddhist terms, that's the person, All your feelings and emotions and thoughts and concepts and ideas and all of this, that's your mind in Buddhism. It's not your brain, it's not just your thoughts, it's a very different use of the word. It refers to the whole being, all the part of you that's not your body, in a very simple way of saying it. So this consciousness, the radical difference, I think, between Buddhist view of what we are and where we come from is this one. That, the consciousness, when we began at life, at the beginning of life, when the egg and sperm come together, what normal, if we're ordinary materialist view, we would say that's when I began, And then if you're a Christian, or for example, you would say at that point God perhaps puts the soul into you and the person is there. God created you, the real you, right? Well, Buddhism has neither of those views, There is, of course, the egg and sperm. It's very obvious. This egg and sperm comes together, the egg from the mother and the sperm from the father. But in Buddhist terms, what causes them to come together and stay together is not God or some superior being. And I'm not criticising that view, but it's just not the Buddhist view, Putting something there, creating something, that the you that turns in, the part that, what goes into that egg and sperm that causes it to continue to stay together and turn into the fetus, right? As opposed to all the other egg and sperms which go down the toilet, or whatever happens to them. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, just normal, ordinary, Then what causes them to stay together is the entry into them of the continuity, if you like. I'll not describe this, because this is the crucial point of the wheel of life, The continuity of a part of your consciousness. In other words, if you're sitting here in this chair at this moment labelled Fred, whatever, the conscious part of it, if you had the clear memory to trace back each moment of this life without losing a single second, which we can clearly see most of us can't do. We remember fleeting moments of our lives, don't we, So if we were able to trace back a consciousness right back to the, coming out of the womb, and before that, the 9 months in the mother's womb, when there was a kicking, living little being in there growing and developing. You, in other words, Fred growing, okay? Well, you get right back to the very first moment of the egg and sperm. We'd all agree, wouldn't we, whether we think Christian or whatever, that that's usually the beginning of the person. Well, maybe people have a different view, but the Buddhist view is this. If you traced your consciousness right back, you'd get back to that moment. So then the key question is, isn't it, what was the moment before? Where was I, if you like, the moment before? Well, Christian view, you came from God. Western materialist view, you didn't exist before, you are the body, and that's it, babe, And then the Buddhist view is that a subtler level of this consciousness, and I'll describe this now, is coming from a previous moment of its existence. In other words, your consciousness, in Buddhist terms, if you can trace it back from now to the conception, you can keep tracing it back. There's a continuity, an unbroken continuity of your conscious energy. In just the same way, you think about it. There's a continuity of anything. If you trace back the body of Robina from this moment right back, where did it come from? Excuse me, my mother's egg, my father's sperm. Where did they come from? Their bodies. Where did they come from? Their mother's egg, their father's sperm. And so you can trace back the continuity of physical energy. You can trace back the continuity of this beads, their bone apparently, right? So that came from some animal. So you can trace that back. You understand? Everything. Piece of paper, you trace it back to a tree, which goes back to a previous tree. Everything has got a continuity of its own particular energy. So in Buddhist terms, consciousness or mind, and there are many very profound teachings on this, really to go deeply into, to think about and meditate on. Consciousness is non-physical. It's not something physical. It doesn't have the characteristic of a brain or nervous or system or anything like this, It's not physical. Consciousness is non-physical energy. Now, the Christian view would say that the soul is that, right? In Buddhist terms, it's all of you, if you like, all your consciousness, your thoughts, your characteristics, your personality, in other words. And that doesn't come from your mother and father, because in Buddhist terms, that doesn't come from the egg and sperm. That's not found in the genes. You can see tendencies. You can see, you know, we can really, there's no contradiction, you know, the Buddhist term, Buddhist view, there's no contradiction between saying that your body came from your father and mother and that you can see physical characteristics and tendencies and things like that. That's not a contradiction. I mean, there's no time to go deeply into all of this stuff now, but it's all there in the Buddhist teachings, you know, Buddhist philosophy. But basically, consciousness, the person, comes from a previous moment of this continuity of consciousness, in the same way you have the continuity between now and conception. So you just keep tracing it back. So Buddhist view is this continuity of consciousness, right, is uniquely one's own. It didn't come from somebody else. It wasn't created by some person, mother, father, or anybody else, or a superior being. It's not a created thing. It's created in the sense it's moving, it's changing from moment to moment. But in the same sense that this mala, you know, it is created, but not out of like a puff of smoke. Do you understand? Like, boom, there's nothing, boom, there's a mala. Not like that. We know there's a logical cause and effect continuity, isn't there? Well, that's exactly the Buddhist view. It's a logical cause and effect continuity. So given that one can look into how the mind is non-physical. Now this is a crucial point in Buddhism, because the whole of Buddhist picture of this thing of wheel of life, the whole Buddhist philosophy of karma, you know, which is Buddhist view of describing how come we are what we are, how come reality is. It absolutely is the crux of it is this, that consciousness is non-physical, you know. So this continuity of consciousness. Now, we've got different levels of consciousness. It's really obvious, you know. We've got the waking, walking, talking, conceptual, sensory level of our reality, isn't it? Which is usually the person that we know that we are, right? Then we all know experiences. We go to sleep. The body essentially becomes, you know, kind of quiet. The senses aren't functioning. The sensory level of our consciousness has temporarily ceased. The normal, ordinary, everyday kind of working, walking, talking, calculating, conceptual consciousness is certainly not working at sleep, is it? It's unconscious. Except for a certain period when we have this dream world, this totally interesting, everyone has different views about it, this level of our reality we call dreams. Now, obviously, it's your consciousness. In Buddhist terms, it's another level of your consciousness. So according to the more esoteric teachings, which is really kind of tasty and appropriate here, we've got the gross level of consciousness, if you like, which is the day-to-day functioning level. We've got the subtler level, and we do taste that occasionally. We touch upon it in dreams. But there is this subtler level. Now, I mean, we know there are so many people who have so many experiences of leaving their bodies in dreams and doing remarkable things and having kind of clairvoyant experiences of the future, all these things. You know, with most of us in our culture, we take them for kind of like a grain of salt, you know. But in Buddhist terms, this is kind of interesting, because this subtler level of consciousness, because it's not gross and doesn't depend upon the existence of body and brain, right, then it has got more power. And what's interesting in Buddhist terms is subtler level, and there are even subtler levels of our consciousness, and I'll talk about that. This level of our conscious being doesn't depend for its existence upon a brain, a nervous system, a body. And this is, you know, the way Buddhism describes, which is how come a person can leave their body, which we find in the West outrageous concept and kind of fascinating, but nobody understands it. We would say we don't know how to explain it, and scientists don't know how to explain it. Well, Buddhism has detailed explanations, you know. It's normal in Buddhism, no big deal. Because consciousness is non-physical in its nature, you know. Even the gross level, which depends for its existence and its functioning upon a decent brain. We can see your brain, you know, if your brain is messed up, well, everything comes out kind of crooked, doesn't it? But Buddhist terms, your consciousness, your thoughts, your feelings, they are not physical, you know. And that means your anger, your love, your kindness, your generosity, that's your mind, that's your consciousness. That's not physical. It functions as the gross level, as I'm saying, through the body, through the brain. But it isn't those things. So consciousness in general, in Buddhist terms, is non-physical. And as I said, a crucial point is it doesn't come from God or Buddha or some superior being, or your parents for that matter, which is, you know, how it argues with those two major different views. It comes from previous moments, if you like, of you. Just that you, in a past life, were labelled another person, labelled another being, that's all. The you of you now, yes, is labelled Rabina, but Rabina, we all can agree, wasn't here, you know, before the time when the egg and sperm came together. This is clear. But the consciousness continued from before. So this is a crucial point in this whole idea of all of Buddhist practice is centered on this idea that the consciousness, your thoughts and feelings and emotions, your suffering, your happiness, your positive, your negative, whatever you want to call it, all of it is yours. It didn't come from someone else. So if you want to find a creator in Buddhism, you know, and it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but all the teachings on this are all there, you know, in Buddhism. You can be called the creator. Who made your own suffering? You, honey, sorry, you know. So all of Buddhist practice is based on this essential point. That, and this is what the view of karma is. And this is where the whole idea of so-called the wheel of life, the wheel of life. What this means in the most simple way is that, if we look into our thoughts and feelings and emotions now, which is the starting point if you're attempting to practice, So Buddhism talks about practice, and we usually have this idea of meditation. So meditation in Buddhism, this word, it means, it's in Tibet, the Tibetan word for it simply means, it means essentially becoming familiarizing yourself. So you can say in the broadest possible meaning of this word meditation, it doesn't just refer to what you're doing in this posture, someone looking holy with their eyes closed, being mindful, which is our usual idea of what meditation is. Meditation has a much deeper, clearer, bigger meaning, It's in general, if you're using your mind at whatever level, to be familiar, to familiarize itself with, say, the various things that are called cause and effect and meaning of reality and love and kindness and all this stuff that we label spiritual, right? Then that's called meditation. So truly, this activity, each one of us sitting here at this moment, concentrating, each of us listening, including me, words are coming out of my mouth, but I'm listening to this stuff, processing it. Same thing. Then each of us actually is meditating. This is called meditation. Because we're familiarizing our minds with certain approaches to reality, So meditation, and of course there are other formal modes where you do it far more intensively, and they're very sophisticated in Buddhism. And what they're all about they're the methods that you use to help yourself, to familiarize yourself first with, say, Buddha's view of reality, karma, this, and kindness and love, and all the stuff that is called Buddhism, let's say. And then familiarizing yourself also with what's actually happening in your own mind. Because this is absolutely crucial. But Buddha's view, like I'm saying, is, your mind is yours. Your suffering, therefore, what you experience, what you feel, what you say, what you do, all your experiences, what happens to you, how people perceive you, how they treat you, whether you're happy, whether you're suffering, whatever. All of this, essentially, is coming from our mind, which we're going to talk about, because this is the whole idea of wheel of life, right? So, if this is true, we take that even as a given in the very beginning, then clearly we have to learn to really become familiar with this mind. We have to learn to know well how to use this mind, because it's this precious resource. Buddhism is saying, ultimately, each being who exists, having a consciousness, necessarily possesses the potential to be fully awakened, enlightened. These words, Buddha. Fully awakened just means Buddha. It's a Sanskrit word, But it's this state, Buddhahood, awakening, enlightenment, which we sort of think of as some kind of like place in heaven, next life or something, which is how we tend to think of spiritual. It's actually a psychological state, because we are talking in Buddhism always about mind or consciousness. It's a psychological state. Indeed, a state that most of us can't even conceive of. We would certainly not in our ordinary Western view of reality, Western view of psychology, would never posit such possibilities. Of being absolutely beyond suffering, absolutely clairvoyant, omniscient, basically. Omniscience is one of the qualities of Buddhahood. And Buddhism is saying each one of us, having this mind or consciousness, necessarily possesses that potential, And that means also, omniscience is one aspect of it. Fully developed consciousness, beyond which it can't be developed further. That also one of the qualities of an enlightened consciousness, which is our potential, is absolute empathy with all living beings. Absolute love, compassion, these words that we all know, The full development of those qualities. Just this too, for example, this. Now, in our ordinary Western terms, we would never even imagine, we would never conceive, we don't ever posit the concept, the idea that we can be utterly free of suffering, absolutely free of delusion and neurosis. No way. As long as we think we can keep it under reasonable control, then we're a reasonable human being, Well, Buddha's idea is that's just ridiculous. You're completely shortchanging yourself. This consciousness is like, the analogy of water. I always think it's such a simple one, but very tasty analogy. Water, we know, is simply that pure, clear stuff, isn't it? But we also know it's polluted all the time, constantly polluted. But we also know that with enough clarity and intelligence, you can, by finding understanding the nature of the pollution, you can then find the antidotes to remove it, to come to what? Pure, clear water. And we know that pure, clear water is never fundamentally, permanently tainted by the pollution, is it? The water nature is always there. Do you see my point? H2O-ness is always there. Well, that's a good analogy for our consciousness. Buddha's saying our true nature, the true nature of what is consciousness, its nature, its natural state, is pure, clear, perfect, awakened. infinitely compassionate, infinitely wise, infinitely loving. This is Buddha's fundamental point upon which everything is based. This is our natural state, Buddha's saying. So it doesn't sound, it's not something, this purity is not, Christians, for example, I was brought up a Catholic, which I have great respect for, I was taught that God is within me, God is in everyone. It's saying a similar thing. But in Buddhism, it's a far more exactly precise. We are actually God. I mean, my mother was shocked when I told her that, my dear Catholic mother. That's kind of arrogant, right? But this is not being arrogant. This is Buddhist view. This is Buddhist experience. This is Buddha's kind of presentation of his discovery of reality. That our own being itself is perfect, is in its nature unpolluted. But at the moment, totally polluted. The pollution is there, no question. And the pollution is called suffering. The pollution is called, and then the causes of suffering, which are our neuroses. So the whole Buddhist idea of what practice is, on the basis of the fact that we have this infinite potential, sitting there waiting to be uncovered, just waiting there to be uncovered, it's ours, and no one gave it to us. It didn't come from God or Buddha. It's not some freak accident. It's not like Mother Teresa in Buddha's terms just popped out of the sky, some holy being, especially blessed. In Buddhist terms, she is the, this is what I'm going to talk about now, she is the person who has already done a lot of the work of depolluting her consciousness. And she popped into this life in her new mother's womb, and because of her past work that she carried with her in her consciousness, she then was able to do effectively, effortlessly, what she did in this life to benefit others, to be compassionate, This is the idea. She's no accident, So none of us is any accident. This is one of the things I was going to talk about. So, back to this consciousness. So this pure nature that we all possess. And so what the work of a spiritual path is, and certainly the Buddhist one, is the work of learning to hear how that is so, hear the qualities of what your potential really is, learning to know what does it mean, H2O, then learning to discover the nature of the delusions, the pollution, and then the work is to remove the pollution. That's all. That's it. And to develop the qualities, to develop the H2O-ness to its full potential. That's the job of becoming a Buddha. That's the job of a Buddhist. So this is on-the-earth stuff, This is all practical. It's to do with the mind. It's to do with who we are. Not some holy place called spiritual, which is separate from our life. But real life is here, and it kind of feels like spiritual contradicts it, And we all have this vague idea that we've got to give up things that are delicious and nice to be able to be spiritual. It's not true. Okay? All Buddha's saying is, and this is an interesting point, Buddha is saying that one of the characteristics of this pure consciousness, of this person, this mind, that is, when it's depolluted, is that it's ridiculously happy. Because happiness, or this word they use often in spiritual terms, bliss, just means very, very happy, that's all. Bliss is the natural experience of this unpolluted consciousness. This is exactly what Buddha is saying, So the whole idea, one aspect of the reason why a person would want to practice the spiritual path is because you want to be happy. It's something you check up, every moment of your life. What is propelling you to do whatever you do, generally, isn't it? This is this constant wish for happiness, contentment, fulfillment. Sometimes it's simply just the relief of some stress, not even to forget about the positive aspect, actual pleasure. And that's like kind of almost like too much to expect, isn't it? Do you understand? The pollution is so intense that just a little bit of a relief from it, please, would be nice. But what Buddha's saying is when the pollution is gone completely, and we're going to discuss the qualities, what is that pollution in Buddhist terms, then in the nature of who you are, you will be so blissful, it's incomprehensible to us now. And this is said, again, to be a simple fact that Buddha is describing, not some holy thing that somehow comes from God, or you get it when you give up all the pleasures of life or something. It's just something natural, it's just something integrated, it's something innately in who you are. Bliss is the taste, is the experience of this unpolluted mind, awakened mind, whatever you like, So the natural progression of the depollution is, as you get more and more of the rubbish out of the way, you become more and more so-called happy. Meaning, an enormous sense of well-being. That's what it means. Just enormous sense of utter contentment, fulfillment, happiness, joy, all these things, right? This is just from your own side now, not even mentioning how we affect other people. We're looking at our own side, So one of the fundamental then reasons to want to do this is because it is natural to want to be happy. We know that all the choices we make in our life are naturally to get what we want, to get the thing that we think will make us happy. Okay, we're going to look at whether it does. That's the point to look at. But that's what drives us, isn't it? When you choose a meal, you don't immediately choose the meal you loathe most and say, oh, great, I'm going to have this disgusting food now. You don't understand, it's so obvious. We immediately choose what we think, what we like, you know. So, okay, then Buddha's point is, right, you know you want to be happy. Then he's also saying, in fact, it is your potential. It is your absolute nature. You can be happy. That is the natural state of who you are. So then the very valid question next is, well, how come I'm not? You know, am I? We all have to humbly admit we're not. We have to admit we don't have happiness all the time. We are suffering. We have it for a while. It seems to go. It's fleeting. We don't really understand what causes it. We try this, we try this, we try this. Our entire life, isn't it, is trying to find what the hell causes happiness. It's just simply being content even. We don't seem to be able to find it. So that's what Buddhism says. Okay, sorry guys, you do want to be happy, you have the potential to be happy, but excuse me, you're using the wrong methods. Wake up, you know. So that's where the contemplation has to begin. That's where we have to start looking. Okay, then Buddha, so what he's stating, he states various things. Buddha presents his philosophy very clearly, but he's saying, don't just believe it. Now you start using it, checking it out for yourself to see if there's any validity there. That's our job. That's our part of it. He's done the work. He was an ordinary being. In Buddhist terms, he was an ordinary person, polluted and suffering, and through discovery, through this practice of the work, doing the depolluting, he became so-called enlightened. You know, these words, fully happy, blah, 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 all these things. And all he's saying is, it is our potential. So he presents his path. And then it's up to us to take it, to look at it, to check it out, to taste it, to experience it, and see if there's any truth in it. That's up to us. That's our part. So, this is where the work begins. He is saying it's our natural state, we can be. Then he's saying, well, if you're not already reasonable to look, well, you have to check out what it is that's causing you not to be happy, or what it is that's causing you the opposite, which is called suffering. And this is the whole thing. So this is exactly now the crux of Buddha's teachings, right? So we've discussed what the mind is, you know, just briefly, that it isn't physical, it doesn't come from God or Buddha, it doesn't come from mother and father, so you can't blame them, you know. It's yours. So it's ours. It's ours, you know. If it's there, if you have it, it's yours. No one put it there for you. It's yours. Who created it? Well, you must have. So now let's look at that. That's the point. So this is where we start to look at how, what is suffering? What is the nature of suffering, right? How is suffering? What is it? And then, indeed, absolutely, what causes it? So there's this presentation of Buddha's teachings called the Four Noble Truths, you know. And again, it all sounds very holy with these capital letters and nobles and all this stuff, and we sort of do really separate religion so completely from our lives. But in Buddhist terms, it's simply a philosophy that's presenting life. It's not there is nothing separate from life. It's not a possibility to separate it from life, you know. So these Four Noble Truths are this simple point. One, there is suffering, right? But what's really important about that, and this is where sometimes we hear these Buddhist teachings and, oh, life is suffering, you just go boom into this, it's kind of a bit depressing. We kind of think, well, excuse
you